The Waves of Tech is the down-to-earth tech podcast for you, your family, and your friends. We remove all the complicated, drawn-out explanations of technology and simply talk about how technology is influencing every element of our lives, from social media and the cloud to tweeting and mobile communication. We talk tech in a different way. So plug in your devices and listen as we get ready to ride the Waves of Tech.
On episode 422 of The Waves of Tech, the real Super Mario dies, daylight savings tech to-dos, and Apple no longer disclosing unit sales. The Waves of Tech is powered by modernlife.network, modern issues, modern discussions. Well, Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing actually pretty good. It is a early Sunday morning, which is the end of daylight savings time. So I know later tonight I'm going to be like, where'd the sun go? It's supposed to still be up, but it's not going to be. But I'm doing well. I want to tell a quick story of tech trivia here, Dave, if you don't mind, before we get going.
Absolutely.
And that is, I was working with a customer yesterday, and we were talking and started looking at some of their systems, and they were having some issues. And their phone call system, when I looked at it, is running on OS 2. And a lot of you might not be familiar with OS 2. So just in real brief, back in the history of our technology companies, Microsoft and IBM and Microsoft were very close, and they did a lot of joint ventures together and things like this. And they started a co-development of some different kinds of products, but eventually when the ties between IBM and Microsoft broke up, IBM came up with their own desktop software called OS 2, which was to be a direct competitor of Windows 3.1, and thus the operating system OS 2 was born, and then eventually OS 2 Warp. And all of this kind of transpired and lasted from about 1997 through 2001. So I was just really amazed that a product that old was still operating and running their call system. So I guess it just goes to show you we don't have to be on the bleeding edge. But when we look at, in retrospect, of I think what a lot of people might still be running, sometimes it gets a little scary.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, because I remember you sent that screenshot to myself and Mike, my brother, your son, and former co-host on here. And it was new to me, because I'm just not that intimately familiar with OSs, and Mike was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And just going through and learning about OS 2, written in C, C++, and assembly language, just to kind of see some of the graphics associated with that operating system. You're right. We don't need to be cutting edge. We don't need to be, have the finest and latest and greatest in technology and operating systems to have something like a phone system run. And pretty incredible, Steve, that, as you said, something that hasn't been around, that really been talked about for 15, 16 years, is still operating and being used by probably not just your company that you work with, but probably several other like smaller organizations as well.
So periodically I like to throw out some unique information, but I think we have a good show lined up today, Dave. Well, I guess I'll let you talk about our scheduling and what's coming on next week.
Yeah, so next week, Steve and I didn't schedule this, but Steve, you're going to be out of town and I'm going to be out of town that day, so it'll be a Monday. It's also Veterans Day, so we're actually going to be taking next week off, and we'll come back the following week with a new episode of The Waves of Tech. So in the meantime, make sure you guys head over to our YouTube channel. Just search Waves of Tech with Steve and Dave. You can check out some of our old posts and our old episodes. Also, you can head over to modernlife.network and catch up on any of your old or past or missed episodes from our show as well. And of course, Steve, Veterans Day coming up. Make sure anybody that's out there that is a veteran that has served proudly and honorably with us are keeping out and looking out for those social media posts and some of those news articles about where you can get your free drinks, your free breakfast, your free lunches and dinners. And for the veterans out there, of course, eternally grateful for everything that you've done and that you continue to do for us here.
If I may jump on that just real quick, Dave, and certainly Veterans Day is next weekend here in the United States, and many other countries around the world also have an appreciation for their veterans of their country and for what they've done. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of cool things for veterans, commercially to say thanks. But if you know of a veteran, here's the most important thing that you can do. And that is just say Thank you for your service. You would be surprised what those few words mean to a veteran and how far they will go in appreciation. So from us to all the veterans, we thank you for your service and dedication, and Godspeed with whatever's going on in your life now. And certainly we pray for veterans that are deeply in trouble and need services and support, and those organizations are available. If you're a vet and are in need of assistance, reach out to somebody. And other than that, God bless all veterans.
Well, Steve, with that said, let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more of our conversation here we want to get to. And I want to start this off with, I grew up gaming. I played the first Nintendo 8-bit that came out. We had Super Nintendo, which ended up being 16-bit technology. And then eventually we had a couple more different gaming systems and kind of got into it when I was a lot younger. I don't really game much anymore. I can't tell you the last time I actually picked up a controller. I don't have a system in here. But anytime it goes back to the original games with Nintendo of Super Mario, Super Mario 2, I have a lot of close connection, a lot of nostalgia when it comes to that. And so we found out this last week that the real Super Mario has actually died at age 84. And for those of you that don't know how the game the character was called Mario and how the game became Super Mario, was that actually Mario Segale, the man after whom the video game hero Super Mario was named, he was a successful Italian-American property developer that lived in the state of Washington here in the United States. So in the 1980s, Mario actually leased a warehouse to Nintendo of America, and of course the gaming company decided to name the star of their video game after him. And he actually joked, Steve, this is pretty funny, in the Seattle Times in 1993 that he was, quote, still waiting for my royalty checks. And to give a little bit more history here, Super Mario, as coined, was originally going to be named Jumpman until Nintendo decided it wanted to give the character a proper name. And so it's pretty interesting, Steve, to hear about the video game hero, how his name was born. And it's pretty cool, I think, that Nintendo of America ended up changing somebody who they simply leased a warehouse to and created essentially a new revolution of gaming into what it is today. So unfortunately, Mario has passed away. He leaves behind his wife, 4 children, 9 grandchildren. But of course, the Mario series is cited as one of the most successful video game franchises of all time. You cannot argue that, based on sales, based on popularity, based on where it brought the gaming industry. And of course, Super Mario Odyssey is a more recently released game. It is currently the best-selling game on Nintendo Switch, which we've talked about a few times on this show, and has actually sold more than 12 million copies. So Steve, Super Mario, crazy story about how it's birthed, but rest in peace, Mario Segale, and hopefully everything is okay with his family as well.
There are things within technology and history and the whole evolution that I think sometimes we just become surprised about. And here's one that I was totally unaware of, that Mario was actually a real person. When we look at this, Dave, I think a lot of times products and marketing are really sprung and become popular based on a term or a name or something like that. I don't think if this game had been called Jumpman, it would have been popular at all. There's just something about it. But when we talk about a game called Mario, wow, that's really got a different twist and twang to it. And I believe that's part of the success of this game. I think also in relationship, when we talk about that is, I think of a game called Pac-Man. And I think that has the same kind of nomenclature attachment to the success of it. It had been called Round Ugly Thing Going Around Chomping on Things. It wouldn't have been a success. So I found this very interesting. I think it's worth talking about because I think a lot of things that come from the bowels of an organization or a company, we really don't know some of the histories about it. But here's one that I think is very interesting and that we never honestly kind of heard about it through the entire life cycle of the game, that Mario was indeed a real person.
Yeah, pretty incredible story, again, where it came from, the birth of it. And also incredible that, the brand known as Super Mario has lasted since the early 80s, right? I mean, we're talking 30, almost 40 years of name association, brand recognition with one company, Nintendo, in one game and one superhero known as Super Mario. And Steve, there's not too many things that live on the vine for 30, 40 years, and this is one. It just shows you, the potential when you brand something properly and you continue to incorporate it into your sales, into your culture of your organization, and people are flocking to it. As I said, 12 million copies sold for Nintendo Switch for Super Mario Odyssey. The games are still relevant. People still identify with the character and the gameplay. There's just something timeless, right, about Mario, that name, the brand, and there's no misconception here. Mario is Nintendo and Nintendo is Mario, and I think that's one of the great things that Nintendo has done over the years.
We've talked about, and certainly I'm no gamer, but there's a few of the names of games that certainly I know. One of them, in fact, is Mario. Even these companies today, I believe Nintendo is one of those too, that over time they come out with a, quote, classic package to be able to play the older games on newer hardware platforms. And Mario is certainly one of those classics. Dave, were you a Mario fan back in those days? I know I probably bought you a bunch of crap, but were you a Mario fan?
Absolutely, yeah. As I mentioned, I grew up playing the games. I loved it. Even to this day, I don't play the games, but I'm always intrigued when something new comes out. I always got to check out some YouTube clips of the game, and it just throws me back. I remember my brother and I used to watch this game called, I think it was called, or a movie called The Wiz, and it was this wizard kid that was really good at gaming, and that was the premiere of Super Mario 3. And it was new and it was fresh and it was debuted during that movie, and it just takes me back every time.
That's really cool, and it's fun, and we do this periodically on this show to go back and look at various things in a point in time, and I think it's important too because we always need to remember the transition of where we were and where we've got to now, and I think that's one of the fascinating things about technology is today we are looking at what's going to be happening 10, 15, 20 years in front of us, but I think we find that almost an impossibility, and that seldom are we right when we're looking at the future of technology, Dave.
Absolutely. Well, speaking about the future of technology, Steve, let's move on to Apple and their news that they brought during their fourth quarter earnings call. And this came from their financial officer. And they said that Apple will no longer be revealing how many iPhones, iPads, Macs it sells. And this is coming after another year-over-year of unchanged sales. And it's pretty interesting. A little bit of background here, Steve. Again, they're going to be no longer reporting unit sales of its main hardware divisions, which includes the likes of iPhone, iPad, Mac. And this is going to be the same protocols that Apple already has in place that we know for the smaller devices, the HomePods, the Apple Watch series, AirPods, some of those other products that they have that are bundled under their other products category. And this announcement was actually quite interesting, Steve, because, as I said, the unit sale percentage has been unchanged year over year, despite a revenue jump and a revenue bump of about 29% associated with those products. The decision to stop disclosing unit sales is from the CFO herself, said that it's because that this figure is, quote, not representative of underlying strength of our business. A unit sale is less relevant today than it was in our past. And of course, adding that the unit sales are still a clear part of Apple's goal. They're just not going to be disclosed. And Steve, this really got me thinking. It was either super concerning or something I shouldn't be worried at all, right? We do know that unit sales, of course, don't always accurately represent a business's performance, but it's definitely a figure, a percentage, a graphic, some sort of value that analysts, that journalists, that investors can use to really calculate a product's average selling price. For example, that number can provide a lot of insights into how well the iPhone models are selling. As newer iPhones, like we have XS, XS Max, XR, they're all priced higher than older models that are now going to be discontinued, like the SE, the 6, the 6S. And so, of course, during the upcoming holiday quarter, it's a lot harder for analysts to really measure how well these newly announced Apple hardware products are going to be doing. And so, Steve, I get concerned about it because I often feel, as we talked about before the show, we even hit record about the price hike with so many of the Apple products. It's no longer an affordable line of hardware products. The cheapest model right now, as you said, the Mac Mini is about $800 now. And when you can't look at figure sales and unit sales to calculate the average selling price, it worries me as a consumer that Apple no longer cares about a price point of entry for a lot of individuals, and they almost are coming to the point where their products are amazing, they're beautiful, they're well designed, they're well constructed. They are slowly becoming more of this elitist type of hardware manufacturer, and I feel like the more they hide the unit sales, the more they can actually provide an increase on the sale of their products, and of course, that equals revenue generation on their part. Now, to go on the other side of the conversation, Steve, here is that, just their hardware devices alone doesn't make up all their sales, right? You do have Apple Music, you have Apple Care, they make money off Apple Pay. They have a lot of other digital content and services that Apple generates revenue off of. Of course, you have licensing, you have other services, you have some of the accessories, those are all Apple branded or third-party accessories that they're making a load of money on, billions and billions of dollars a year, and we don't usually see, per se, the unit sales for that stuff. But Steve, going to you, I feel like it's concerning to the fact that we don't have any valid unit numbers to really tell us what the sale price of a product should be. And I think as a consumer, that's really worrying for me.
If you look back in time at each time that Apple has some type of release event, typically within the first few slides of a presentation, they have always told how many iPhones they have sold or how many iPads they have sold and those kinds of things. I would also say that I think they are also trying to, I'm not sure the word is hide, but not portray these numbers to perhaps affect the valuation of the company. Because, when you provide statistics to the world, I think they can be misconstrued, they can be hammered on, they can be twisted into a position that might not be to your benefit. But I have to agree with you that when we're not being that transparent with what the real output is versus the input of the amount of money that they're making, it could become, I would say, troublesome. Certainly from an investor standpoint, I don't think they care, but I think certainly from a consumer standpoint, we sort of care that if you are increasing the amount of dollars in your pocket, but are producing less of those widgets, to me, that's a sign that the market share is going down, but the cost of, or the reciprocal of revenue is increasing. That shows me a certain kind of trend. So it's very interesting that they have decided to do this, especially after the extreme long history of Apple actually wanting to put that in front of everybody's face.
Yeah, I think it's something that Apple has always been proud of, right? It's something that can show, year after year, regardless of what models we're putting out there. There are people that are either replacing their units. There are people that are leaving one brand, i.e. Google, Samsung, whatever it is, and jumping ship over to iOS. It's unusual. I mean, Tim Cook came out and said this is a really poor illustration and argument, but I'm going to say it anyways. This is what he said. Tim Cook adds, this is a little bit like if you go to the market and you push your cart up to the cashier and they say, how many units do you have in there? He says it doesn't matter a lot how many units are in there in terms of the overall value of what's in the cart. And I can see where he's going with that, but at the same time, we're not talking about the mom and pop grocery store. We're not talking about the market up the street. We're talking about a $1 trillion company here that needs to inform their investors, their hardware divisions. I know these numbers are going to be tossed around internally, but when it comes to the investors, when it comes to the analysts and the journalists who report on Apple year in and year out, these are items that I believe the journalists and the analysts need to know. It's when you look at those that work with Business Insider, when you look at people that work with The Verge or TechCrunch, whoever is out there reporting, doing deep analysis about what's going on with the company. These are numbers and these are true unit values that we need to know about. For some of the smaller devices, like I said, Apple Watch, HomePod, AirPods, not making a significant quote-unquote splash, right, in the market. They're popular, but they're not also creating this amazing revenue-generating stream where they need to know. But I do shadow what you think, Steve. I think we really need to have that report of unit sales. I think it really shows us, I don't know if it shows us, maybe it reinforces, that's a better term, reinforces the stability and earning power and earning potential of Apple. And I think for a few of those reasons, I would still like to see those. But the protocol is going to change, and the CFO and Tim Cook seem to be set on their course, and they are moving forward with not reporting unit sales in the future.
It's kind of interesting being that Tim Cook used to be the CFO, and now we're having these kind of decisions made within the financial department there at Apple. But let me kind of flip this around too, Dave. I can look at the opposite here, and that is, are other tech manufacturing companies reporting their widget counts? Let's take, for example, Microsoft. Are they announcing how many copies of Windows 10 they have sold, or how many licenses of Microsoft Server? Or is Google announcing how many home devices that they have sold? I think they, in a way, are, but I don't think as open as Apple has always been. And I guess that's a decision and a right that each company is going to have to ask themselves. But it would be my point that the more information that you give, certainly the market and the public, and the honesty related behind that could become your success and maybe not your demise.
Yeah, I think you're right. To less degree, I don't think Google very much reports. I know Microsoft to some degree shares, I don't know if it's annually or within some report, the number of, operating systems and how many people have downloaded this and how many people are using Edge now and blah, 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 all those numbers. And I guess maybe we're putting a little bit too much demand on Apple at this point, right? I think for a company that's worth $1 trillion, that is so outside of the realm of what people can comprehend and understand. I mean, you look at, $8.75 billion, that they've sold over for X products, right? Like, what was this in 2013? They sold almost $9 billion worth of iPads, right? Okay, I get that. That's an astronomical number, but people can't relate to that. So when you look at a unit sale, we sold, 320 million iPads. Okay, that is something that's tangible. That's something that's meaningful. And I think that's what analysts, journalists, consumers like you and I, tech reporters, people that are just tech enthusiasts, those are things that we can grasp. Those are things that we can comprehend. Steve, I can't imagine what 9 billion is. I don't know what 3 billion looks like. I don't know what 7.4 billion looks like. It doesn't register to me. It's just this far out number. And so I think that's the reason I want to see it, because it makes sense. It's explainable. It's something tangible I can look at in sort of year to year, say, okay, this product has been dipping, this product has been increasing, or if it's stable, what are the factors to that? And I think those unit sales really allow us to get a little bit deeper into the conversation of why Apple is doing what they're doing.
Okay, I think you brought up something interesting, and that is, I think at least for me, from a consumer standpoint, that widget count to me means more than probably a monetary number as within the market and things like that. I guess they really don't care about how many are sold. They want to know what the end dollar value is in terms of making all these other marketing decisions. Does that kind of seem logical there?
Yeah. I mean, I get where we're going with this, and I get where Apple's going with it, and it's a logical step, And as you said, Apple's going to do what they want. They've been doing what they wanted for years, and I think it's the underlining concern I have is that it's an opportunity for them to continually increase their cost per product without any justification per se. But as we can see it, to bring this full circle, Steve, is that I guess if a phone was $300 a couple years ago and now it's $1,000 and nobody is saying no to the next phone, what's the point, right? If they're going to pay the $1,000, why even report the unit sales? Because they can set the price at whatever price point they want and people are still going to buy it, right? So you can jack the Apple Watch Series 4 up to $600 and you're still going to sell X million number of units because people want the product. So I guess I'm talking myself into my argument and I'm talking myself out of it, but Apple has been known to set a price and people follow suit. So I really don't know, other than I've completely confused myself on our own show about my opinion on this. So there's so many different angles you can take.
No, I think your original comment and thought is still valid. In that, I think we have a right as a consumer to, I'm not going to say a right, it would be nice to understand or at least be able to look up those kinds of numbers. But I will tell you that the average consumer could care less how many they've sold. As you mentioned in just previous comment, that for them, It's the hardware, the device, the product, whatever it is that is important to them, and they could honestly care less how many were sold. And I think that's typically true for consumer. Now, when we look on a product monetization evaluation point, that's probably a little bit different in that mathematically the markets, I mean, they care, but that's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned about, did you meet or surpass targeted dollar amounts? It's an interesting juggle that I think they're going to go through, because I think in the Apple world, a lot of people always expected those numbers to be available. Although if you're halfway decent at math, you can calculate those numbers regardless based on product price and total revenue. So I think we can still get to that. Bottom line, it's just more difficult.
Yeah, more difficult. I guess it's weird, Steve, because after so many years of them broadcasting and essentially, I guess, showing off, right, during their conferences about their success with selling these individual devices, it's sort of become their identity, right? We always look for those numbers in that presentation as part of that conference and that opening act, and we're not going to see that any further. So there's a little bit change going on internally, especially with the culture of Apple, where it's like, you know what, as long as we're meeting our financial goals and, you know, the estimates that Wall Street and investors are hitting, who cares about how we get there? If we sell one less iPhone, but we get 10 more people to sign up for Apple Music at $10, $20 a month, okay, great, we're making our financial goal. Okay, if we're selling less iPads, but we have, you know, 1,000 more people with Apple Pay that they're using now, which we're making a percentage on. Bottom line is that they're still hitting their goals, and I think that's ultimately where it comes down to.
To me, it was always a wow factor, and I enjoyed those numbers. I mean, some of those numbers are just unbelievable to even comprehend. However, does it do anything for me or you in a decision to buy one of their products? Probably not. I always thought it was a great marketing tool to look at those numbers and go, wow, that's just insane.
Well, Steve, as we mentioned at the top of the show, we are recording on Sunday, which happened to be Daylight Savings Day. So I got an extra hour of rest, and it's going to get darker a lot sooner tonight. But I've always come across so many great articles that are like, okay, now it's daylight saving time. Here are the things you need to do in your house, just as a reminder, right? Change your air filter, have somebody come out and service anything that you need around the house, change your smoke detector batteries, you know, check the fluids in your car, whatever you would do traditionally on daylight savings, you know, go out and do. But then I started thinking, Steve, why don't we have a daylight savings tech to-do list, right? There are so many things that I think so many users month after month, year after year, forget to do. And I figure what better than to make Daylight Savings Week an opportunity to get some of those things done. And I just want to drop a couple ideas in there, you know, such as making sure your computer is completely updated, that you don't have any outstanding updates, whether you're running any Windows or any Macs. If you have any updates on operating systems on your phones, this is a good time to do it. I also have in here, Steve, about doing your security checks, that having your virus software and all of your critical infrastructure established, you know, within your home. And this can relate even to business. If you have a small business, your own businesses, having those antivirus security software checks in place. I also have new batteries, right? You may have things that have AA, AAA, Cs, Ds that are electronically based. Maybe it's your, you know, Bluetooth speakers. Perhaps it's some of your other smart home devices that are running off batteries rather than, you know, plug-in electrical. This is a good chance to update those so that you're not soured in the future when you go to use a product and you don't have any batteries. I also have in here, change your passwords. We talk about that a lot. There's a lot of security concerns. There's a lot of identity theft. And this is passwords for your phones. It's password for your emails, both home and at work. This is passwords associated perhaps with your security system at home. You know, I think we forget there's passcodes and passwords to use with that. There's so many different passwords that we use year in and year out, day after day, that require an update. And this would be a really good time to do that. Also, if you have any issues with your phone, you know, perhaps there's been some damage to your phone. You know, maybe you broke your screen, maybe a button isn't working, there's some toggle switch. You know, maybe your mouse is broke, who knows, at home, but now is the time to sort of get those hardware items fixed. And lastly, Steve, I always think this is a good idea to call your providers. And the providers, I mean, is your ISPs, your cable subscription, you know, whatever. If you're looking to like cut your costs, you know, looking for a deal during the holidays to save some money, this is a chance to get on the phone, spend an hour or so, trying to work out any issues you've may have had with any of your providers. Those are just some of the things, Steve, that would fall on my tech to-do list. And I think we need to do this year in and year out, is make Daylight Savings Week not just a time to make sure your house is in order, but to also make sure your tech is in order.
I really, really like this, Dave, and I think there's a wealth of to-dos that we can all do. There are certain things that we need targets to remind ourselves to do certain things, or we just become blasé and continue our old habits or whatever the case may be. And I will tell you up front, we are not going to start a new international day like we did with podcasting for this. However, I think you're right on the money. And a couple things I would throw in. Number one would be backup. If you're not backing up your data, then you don't have a digital life. You have no recovery procedures. And I think one of the most important things is people say, yeah, I back up, but they have it perhaps in one place, which is not really a backup. That's just a copy of your data. And the other thing I think a lot of people fail to do is periodically testing your backups. Can you, in fact, recover any past data in case of a mishap, mistake, whatever the case may be, and recover those files? I think a lot of times you'd be surprised how many times there is a recovery failure because we don't test periodically our backups, that there can be an error, whatever the case may be, that prohibits that. I think one of the things also moving forward as we move towards 2019, Dave, spam calling, robocalling to phones has become an epidemic. And there are some staggering numbers that are coming out in terms of the amount being generated. And the AARP has come out with newsletters to senior citizens on how to protect themselves because many seniors are getting caught off guard. They're getting surprised, and it's costing them a lot of money. So with respect to robocalls, make sure you educate yourself and certainly any people around you. There are apps that can help protect ourselves when it comes to these types of calls. And if you have any questions, call your phone provider and ask them what to do, because a lot of times they have internal tools that they can use. They can recommend third-party options to you. As we have with spam and hackers, we also now have to thwart off these robocalls. And that's something that we all need to take a look at in 2019. But overall, Dave, I think you're right on the money that we need to go through these procedures, these steps, and have a reminder that we need to keep our things in order. Got to get rid of the trash and get things cleaned up so that we can have a good, viable progression through the remaining time until we change clocks again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good, 6-month reminder of things we need to do. And, our lives get busy. Things happen. You have kids go sent off to college. You have people moving in. You have people moving out. You have job changes, career changes, whatever it may be. And, as our product lines change too, right, Steve? If you move from one system to another, you move from one phone to another, this is a good opportunity, as I said, with Daylight Savings, just to get behind your computer and do those things that you've been wanting to do. And not just your computer in your computer at work, but making sure you're sharing this with people. Hey, when was the last time you upgraded your system at home? When was the last time you did a security check? When was the last time you backed up your data? When was the last time you uploaded all your photos to make sure you're not going to lose any off of your phone? All of those things. And Steve, I did want to shout out your spam and robocalling. It is, of course, during the midterm political campaigns that are going on, I've been getting a load of random texts, a load of random phone calls, and I don't answer any of them. I don't reply to any of them. I delete them immediately. But it is getting to the point where I think the steps that the FCC and other, organizations and government agencies have been doing are doing their best with what they have, but the technology behind a lot of this is really making it really difficult, and it's preying on the most vulnerable, those that don't understand what robocalling and spam is all about, and exactly call your phone providers, put up do not call, put up as many blocks as you can to protect yourself. That's probably one of the best things you can do during this week.
And finally, Dave, today is the 10th year anniversary of Bitcoin. To me, it kind of seems like Bitcoin has been around for much longer than that, but it's the pioneer of digital currency, which is a peer-to-peer methodology to electronically have cash, transfer cash, and do things like this. Started in 2008, I believe, as a academic paper, and eventually became what we know today as Bitcoin. And certainly since Bitcoin, there have been other spin-offs in terms of electronic currency. I am certainly not involved with digital currency. And I know that for some time it has spiked. It has been lucrative for some. I'm still not convinced that a digital currency is the way of our futures. And I say that because I think, number one, a lot of people are just frankly scared of it. And number two, there's a economic unleveraging aspect when we talk about a single currency point of view when it comes to independent relationships between different companies or countries. And that most economics are based on physical currency within a country. So it's not to say that this isn't going big and strong, but happy birthday, Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. As you mentioned, 2008, it started as a 9-page academic paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And in fact, January 12th, 2009 was the first Bitcoin transaction that took place behind the author of that bill and a developer. The transaction is recorded in block 170. And Steve, the whole idea behind Bitcoin utilizing that blockchain technology, the decentralized ledger, and sort of that technology that underpins the whole digital currency craze that's going on. I mean, we've talked about it here. They've had initial coin offerings, which is something different. Instead of an IPO, it's an ICO. And just to see where digital technology and digital currency has gone in a short 10-year period is pretty incredible. And again, I'm definitely not fluent in Bitcoin, how that blockchain technology works, but it continues to grow. It's a method of transparency. It's a method of utilizing this new technology. And they're looking at blockchain, for a wide number of industries. They look at it in the healthcare industry. They look at it in the insurance and the financing industry. And there's a lot of nuance, but there's also a lot of flexibility when it comes to blockchain. But yeah, 10 years of Bitcoin, it seems, Steve, like it's only been around for a couple years because the craze around Bitcoin has just been, I mean, we've seen new podcasts pop up. We've seen new blogs, YouTube channels, just focused on Bitcoin and digital currency. And it's pretty crazy to see how the industry has developed. If you do want more really good information, I'd recommend checking out Home Gadget Geeks. Our friend Jim Collison does a podcast called Home Gadget Geeks. Him and Mike Uyghur do a really good post-show, essentially. They do a YouTube live and they talk all about blockchain technology. They talk about Bitcoin and everything that goes on in the industry. I definitely encourage everybody to check out Home Gadget Geeks. If you're really wanting to dive in and get some really good, solid background, but also the future of Bitcoin and digital technology, that's a really good podcast to check out.
Well, with that, Dave, I guess I would summarize this episode as a hodgepodge, many different topics of different types of content and value, from looking back at the past when it comes to some of the games of this infancy of technology, clear through to the birth of Bitcoin. So with that, Dave, I hope you have a safe trip, and I'll be gone too, but I'm sure I'll be in touch with you. For those that are listeners of this show, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, we won't be here next week, but come on back the following week where who knows what we'll have.
Each week it's different. It's tech talk that matters. So week in and week out, we're going to have something new from the headlines, something new from the news report. So we appreciate everybody as always tuning in. The Ways of Tech is powered by modernlife.network. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to keep on teching.
Medicine is one of the most difficult, fast-paced, yet rewarding paths you can take. You can set out on your own and navigate the student loans, the bureaucracies, and systems that define a typical medical career. Or you can apply for the U.S. Army's Health Professions Scholarship Program and launch yourself into a medical career like no other. Your tuition will be completely covered, and when you graduate med school, you'll learn from and work with some of the most elite minds in medicine. That's the Army difference. Learn more and apply today at goarmy.com/HPSP.